All true believers, and welcome back to another episode of the Movie Pope podcast. And today we've got another great guest on the show. We've got Robin G here from the Greensboro Dance Film Festival, and we are going to chat about dance, the Greensboro dance scene, the film festival, and what has been going on at my alma mater, UNC Greensboro, because there have been a pretty few weird things, shall we say, going on. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video with everybody that you know, because sharing is caring, and we are looking to grow our audience. I mean, 73 subs, come on, we can do better than that. But let's go ahead and dive in. Robin, how are you doing on this fine March Saturday afternoon?
Redefining fine. I'm wonderful. Thank you so much.
Now, I have to say, when I when I was looking for film festival organizers to interview, what caught my eye was the fact that one, you were based in Greensboro, and I spent 4 years of my college career at Greensboro studying at UNCG, and also it's a dance film festival, which is something I had never seen before. Because in my mind, when I think of dance in film, I automatically default to music videos. But
Mhm.
but I remember there was a classmate of mine in my senior year. Her name was Melissa Pijos. Melissa, if you're watching, hi. You should be stoked that I still remember your name. You made a very good impression on me. Um, she made she made a dance film that she showed to our class, and I was just struck by it. And I'm like, wow, like, I mean, this is totally different. It's kind of it's sort of like ballet on film, but it's more than that. Um, so before we dive in, Robin, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, where you came from, and how you got involved in this?
Sure thing. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to
Yeah.
talk about all things dance and film, two of my greatest loves. So, I am a choreographer, filmmaker, and dancer, originally from like the Philly, New York area. I came to Greensboro probably 2003. I am as a professor at UNCG, as you said, in the dance program. I'm currently a full professor,
Go
and
Spartans.
Go Spartans, right? Exactly. And I have this film festival, but my background was more in, it's just kind of strange that I was always living in these two parallel universes. I'm from New York. I was a performer for many, many years, choreographer, working in that like sort of embodied medium of dance and movement, while always having this sort of side gig as a filmmaker. Generally speaking, I worked for film production companies in New York. My undergrad degree was in cinema studies, so I was really interested actually in writing and not making. I like to write, and I kind of liked to analyze film. It was just always something that I did, and they didn't necessarily intersect. And then a lot of the work that I do is kind of my early work, and I guess still some of my work was really in documenting dance and ritual performance in Africa. I worked with African-based companies in New York, and a lot of this interest sort of came about in the whys and the wheres and the whos of some of the performance that I was doing, some of the material that I was working with. So I started traveling to Africa and grabbing cameras and working with people and sort of documenting these performances. And my early research is sort of looking at how, these African ritual practices and performances were evolving over time. So
Hmm.
there was a sense of like conservation and preservation of a thing, while at the same time looking at how the world was impacting communities, particularly communities in West Africa. And a lot of my work was in Senegal and Mali and Guinea and Burkina Faso. And that's sort of how I got the job at UNCG. I came in as an Africanist and helped to develop an African curriculum.
Hmm.
UNCG, strangely, is one of the first programs to have African-based movement forms as part of the curriculum in the dance program. And
Now,
that is
now
to
this
say,
isn't now this is an African study. This is like African dance
this is
studies.
African dance studies, and specific
Okay.
in general, and specifically West African, because that's my sort of area of expertise, what I was performing, and this research that just started to happen that I was doing. And I had kind of a research agenda that was both creative and artistic, and in some ways sort of theoretical and scholarly, looking at Africanist aesthetics and all of this good stuff. And I managed to get this job. and develop this curriculum. So we have these courses, this course curriculum that's required for our BFAs and our BAs, right? They have to take a certain number of African-based courses. In order to do that, you had to create a curriculum that kind of corresponded with the rest of the curriculum and sort of identified itself simultaneously as being unique. So that's how I got here in North Carolina. And I was always, as I said, sort of doing this film work. And as a professor, you kind of have to have this research agenda. And that was sort of the cornerstone of my research. I was trying to find a way to look at the intersection of media and movement, right? This idea of how to represent this work that I was doing as being valued as both of those things, neither one nor the other, which is actually pretty significant because that's what screen dance or dance on film is. At the time, I didn't know that. I just couldn't necessarily prioritize one or the other. And so my kind of dossier for tenure consisted of like DVDs of all of this work that I had been sort of documenting in West Africa, and then my work with students and how I was trying to recreate that work and kind of embody it in my own sort of Western body and be creative. So there were these sort of two parallel universes that I was trying to find that sweet spot that intersected. And that's how I started to discover screen dance, which is not necessarily a new form, by the way. It is interesting to me because my dilemma of trying to find that sweet spot is something that has existed since the inception of the technology. We know that the early iterations of the camera in general, but photography in particular, was looking at a moving body because a moving body helps to make sense in this sort of mediated way. And that was really interesting to me. And that's how I kind of discovered screen dance and sort of did a deep dive into it and realized that there were festivals, but I wanted to figure out a way to bring all of that sort of interesting work to Greensboro, and that's how we got to the film festival.
So, so I just want to backtrack a little bit because there are just a few things that kind of stand out to me.
Hmm.
Um, when it comes to dance, whether whether it's in the Americas or Africa or Europe, dance isn't merely just the moving of the body, right?
Hmm.
You have to develop like a certain costume. I mean, that's why if you go to a ballet, they're going to wear like a specific type of outfit, or if you go to like a reservation when they do their dances, they dress a certain way. It's as you say, there's like an intersection of all these different art forms coming together to try to make the dance experience, all the more fulfilling. Um, so what was it about West African dance that drew your interest and made you want to research them in depth and detail?
Wow, that's a great question. I think for me, as a creative person, I've always been interested in storytelling. And I think that what we see and what we know is that the body has a way of communicating ideas and information, right? And so that's one of the reasons that choreographers make work. They have something to say, and their palette, as it were, is the body, is the human body, as a means of communicating ideas and it with intent. Right. So what is choreography? It's intentional choice making. And those choices are designed to say something, whether that something is abstract or experimental or narrative in nature. So we use the body to tell stories. And people are doing it in different ways in different environments. I just happened to fall into I was looking for a jazz class in New York while I was doing my undergrad, and New York is really the center of a lot of dance. A lot of people think
Hmm.
it's the only one. It's not, but it's really a cultural mecca for artists in general, but dancers in particular. And I started to discover, actually not Africa, I did a lot of work in sort of Caribbean forms first, Brazilian and Haitian, and it's really, as you said, a coming together of lots of different mediums. And that's why dance was really interesting to me, because it is the body coupled with music. What's really specific about sort of Africanist and diasporan forms is that there's this kind of connection and synergy between music, the body, and song and costuming and all of those things coming together for me was really interesting. The deep dive happened because this notion of storytelling, right? is inherently housed in Africanist forms. So you have dance is not something that we go to the theater to see. It's not just performative in terms of spectatorship, but it's part of the human experience. So in Africa, people dance their entire lives. Babies dance while they're in the womb, and then when they're young, they dance on their mother's backs. Dance is part of their enculturation and socialization. So you dance for weddings, you dance for recreation, you dance for marker moments in your lives, you dance when you become a certain age and you transition from one moment in a community to another. So dance is not just a thing that one does for entertainment, but it's a marker in one's life. And that is what was interesting to me. That's also what drew me in. This notion that dance could be something other than performative from that spectator perspective, but inherently a part of one's life. It's not necessarily something that we experience here in the West, but again, that is what made it really interesting to me.
So was there anything in particular special that stood out to you when you observed these dancing rituals over there?
Uh,
Anything that kind
mm,
of differentiated it from say what you would see on a reservation or even what you would see like on stage in New York or LA or you know any other cultural mecca?
right. What would make it different? I think the way that it's organized in communities is what was different, and the fact that it was generally a communal experience, and again, not performative of the body, but not in a way that one simply observed, but it was a reflection of a human experience. That was what was sort of different for me. And I think that that is actually what happens when you see traditional dances on reservations, when you see indigenous people use music and dance and song and ritual as a part of their everyday lives. And
Mhm.
again, that's kind of what differentiated for me, but made it absolutely fascinating.
Gotcha, gotcha. So you come to UNCG, and you join the faculty and you develop this curriculum. Can you can you talk about how you went about setting up a curriculum because I think it's safe to say that, there hasn't been anything like this before. So what you're doing is is brand new and very innovative. Can you talk about like how what you did, who you talked to, what resources you used, or
Hmm.
what resources you were expecting your students to utilize in order to have like a meaningful educational experience?
Oh, that's such a great question. My goodness. Ooh, I think that a lot of my graduate work was in pedagogy and curriculum development. So I did sort of have a background in the notion of how to kind of think about the delivery of really specific outcomes. I think the big question for me was, what were those outcomes? What were the learning outcomes and objectives that one could and should have when crafting this kind of experience, and how to keep it unique from a normative or sort of like a Western experience. So basically what I did is looked at their curriculum as it existed. And this is a physical practice that is also housed in this sort of like historic practice as well. So how to craft a course. I began with one course, like an introductory West African class, and what would be meaningful for students to be able to achieve, right? An understanding of musical form, an understanding of the embodied form, an understanding of historic form, right? Like, and then sort of created four levels of that. So from a beginning introductory experience to a more advanced one, and what would we like students to be able to accomplish after 16 weeks in engaging in these experiences. There wasn't a lot to draw on in terms of people who were actually doing it. I mean, 2003, there weren't that many people doing similar work in this kind of scaffolded way within a curriculum. So I
Hmm.
would draw on previous university professors, my colleagues here at UNCG, a lot of my artistic directors from New York, because a lot of those folks were from the continent. I was traveling back and forth to the continent and interviewing people a lot and talking about sort of the histories of this work and trying to figure out a way to integrate it into a Western space. And then when I figured that out, then I kind of this started to develop, assessment tools for the academy that were different from the assessment tools that we might use for ballet and modern. So what,
Right.
sort of reverse designing a course and then scaffolding levels of that course. That's basically what I tried to do my research, and I didn't do it quickly. It took years, but you started
Right.
with
Right.
one and then built from that.
So, so as you're developing and as you're teaching this course, throughout the years, what have you learned or what have you perfected, throughout your time at UNC Greensboro to go from this pilot program to something that's, embedded in the dance program?
What have I learned?
Yeah, I guess I guess if I'm to sort of like flesh it out a little bit more, like what I guess what would be like the number one thing that you thought, yeah, this isn't going to work, maybe I should scrap that, or students responded well to this, I think I'm going to do more of this, or
Right.
you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. I think for the most part, students, eh, they had it within the curriculum. They had sort of random class, West African or Afro-Cuban classes that just didn't really go anywhere. So I think for me, I was really lucky because I think for the most part, it was because it was slow and steady, and we know slow and steady wins the race. I think it was pretty successful um, in terms of its delivery. For me as a pedagogue, the biggest challenge, and I think that this challenge still exists, particularly for other people, because there's so many more jobs like this now, that
Right.
people don't quite understand the absolute essentiality or the essentialness of music. And so everybody wants to be able to have these kinds of offerings so that our students can experience the body and history and movement in all these new and interesting and different ways. But I think the challenge is really figuring out a way to support it as this unique experience, because we say we want to do that, but I think the biggest challenge for me as a person that was trying to develop this is trying to get buy-in from the institution, which is to say buy-in and acknowledge that the requirements for this, its delivery is different from ballet, is different from modern, is different
Right.
from contemporary. And that buy-in sometimes is financial or economic. So if I'm going to, for me personally, and this is just, I'm a particular kind of um Africanist in that I don't teach to recorded music. I have to have live music because, as I said, for me, music is essential. It is as essential, if not more so, than just movement and context and history. That you have to be able to support what the instructor is doing, and many programs don't want to do that. So they want you to be different while being the same. And so trying to figure out a ways to establish the uniqueness of the form, and then getting buy-in both on the department and the school and the college level was the biggest challenge for me. Not from students. Students love the stuff. They're ready to rock and roll. It's really helping other people understand. And I think this exists for me today with this curriculum, is that it's not the same, and you're not gifting me anything by allowing me to have multiple musicians in the room. Either this is this is the priority, and how do we acknowledge it as a unique thing and not ask it to be the same. You want it to be Western and easy, and it's just not. It's just different isn't necessarily bad or more of anything. We can be different. I don't know. I just feel like often they want us to be. There's a sense of sameness when
Right.
it comes to things that are difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically don't force into this pre-made mold to be its own thing.
Yes.
So so I went to school at UNC Greensboro from 2007 to 2011, and well, at that time it was called Broadcasting and Cinema. It was transitioning to Media Studies.
Hmm.
How did you? I guess what was your interaction like with with the film department, and how did it lead to where you decided we're going to organize this dance film festival?
That is such a great question. It's so interesting to be talking about all of the African work that I do. And I mean, I was really lucky when I came here. I had relative reputation from New York as someone who, had had performed a lot with these companies, and so people sort of knew who I was. And then while I was simultaneously doing all of this film stuff that nobody really knew about, and
Hmm.
because of that, and because when I did my undergrad, I was cinema studies, which was a lot of like writing and viewing and not production, because I was at NYU, and I mean, who would want to sit and like you could barely get into classes. It was the biggest program on campus.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
I when I got here, I would seek out, like I sought out Dr. Frierson and Brett Ingram and those guys, and just kind of I started by just sitting in on classes because I was still doing my research. And like if I needed, I would write a grant, I need a new camera, and I'd call over to broadcast and like, what cameras are you guys using? So my first camera was a DVD. It was a Sony 900. And then, it's constantly through the technology and sort of wanting to stay abreast of what was happening in that field because I did have a foot in it. I was always reaching out to media studies. I sat in on some classes and kind of developed relationships over there. And then over time, the dance and technology course that we were teaching, I was looking at that and trying to figure out a way to make it more relevant and more, more current, because archiving one's work is not the only way that a moving person can interact with the technology. There's so much more. And I was sort of becoming interested in it and invested in it. And I just reached out to folks over there and sat in on their classes and became friends. And then when I started teaching our technology classes, they would either come in or send me graduate students. And so I think from my early days here, I've always had a relationship with folks in media studies and broadcasting and theater for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, Ingram was my film
Right.
production teacher my senior year. So,
He was
so
awesome. I
yeah,
love
so
Brett.
so great shout out to Dr. Ingram.
Mm-hmm.
I never had Frierson though, which is weird because a lot of my classmates said, "Yeah, I've got Dr. Frierson for this and that," and I'm looking at my schedule. I'm like, I do not have this guy for
Right.
anything at
Which is
all.
it's so funny, and which is really funny, and it's so funny. This is a great segue because all that I have always just reached across the aisle and been friends with folks over there. And then I'm also a filmmaker now, so I make dance films. And my last film, my last two films actually, but my last film is still kind of doing a big festival circuit. I was really sort of lucky. I collaborated with Dr. Frierson and Kevin Wells, who's a lecturer in media studies. And so he was
Okay.
my DP. Yeah, we did a 2-camera shoot. And so was Dr. Frierson. And then I had a student from media studies who did sound for me.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that you, the way that the arts are set up at UNC Greensboro, at the surface of you think they would have nothing to do with each other because the music people want to do their own thing,
Yep.
dance wants to do its own thing,
Yep.
art, media studies, and don't even talk to the theater kids. Like, I mean, unless you're going to make a movie that's going to make a festival run, they won't even talk to you.
Yep. Yep.
And so when you go so when you go down there, you actually realize, oh, it's actually this it's this ecosystem where they're all relying on each other. And I don't want to, and I'm not just saying this because because I was a film major, but I kind of feel like the media studies was kind of like at the epicenter because whether you're a dancer or a musician or actor, or I should say theater person, everybody kind of gravitated towards the media studies people because they all knew these people kind of need us in one way or another. um
I think
so
that that's a little bit different now, though. I think with the creation of the colleges of the arts
yeah.
and with a new not necessarily, I wouldn't go so far as to say focus, but I think that there's a lot more of like interdisciplinary work happening. I mean, and just having been here for 21 years, like when
Yeah.
I first got here, reaching out across the aisle was necessary because everyone existed in those silos. Not as much anymore. I only knew theater because a grad student brought a faculty member to my class because he was doing a film. I mean, he was doing a play that he needed a choreographer, but it was Wole Soyinka's Death and the King's Horseman, and he needed an African dancer to choreograph. And from that moment, I from with Alan Cook. I also had relationships with theater, but these are things that you had to do, intentionally in the early days. Not so much anymore. I think there's been more dance students who have like double majored in media studies, which is really hard to do. It's nearly impossible. Also with theater, it's nearly impossible. But I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
because faculty are trying more, I think students are, and I think that there's a bit more, not enough, but a bit more focus or promotion of the notion of interdisciplinarity and kind of like cross-curricular collaboration within the arts than
Yeah,
there
and that
was when I first got here, for
yeah,
sure.
and I was gonna say like I was gonna say because just speaking from someone who's part of the media studies program for 4 years. At that time, it seemed like everybody, as you said, were their own silos, they're in their own boxes, doing their own thing.
Hmm.
But but this just goes to show you just how weird I am. Occasionally, I will go back to the UNCG website and just check and see, what does the curriculum look like now. What strikes me is the fact that there's more of an openness to where you're allowed to like take a class in, let's say, like, theater directing, and that can count towards your media studies credits.
Yes.
Or you can do or you can take a class in capoeira, for instance, and
Right.
that can count as part of your theater. Or even or in some cases, like if you're an art major, if you take like a set design class, that counts to your requirements for art. So it's just so striking how now it's inconceivable to think you you can't take classes that are just specific to your discipline. You kind of have, in a way, you're kind of forced to take classes in these other disciplines, because whether you want to admit to it or not, they they're all kind of interconnected. They all function, both the same way but also differently, and you kind of need to know how they work in order to be successful in your field.
And ultimately, if you want to be a creative person, right, like there's a certain level. I mean, I think being a creative person, it is incumbent upon us to be thinking broadly while having a narrow focus on a pre-professional program, right? I'm a dancer and I have a very specific program, or curriculum that I have to follow, while at the same time, as a pedagogue, I'm interested in helping to develop, creative minds. And so, you know, taking a set design class as a visual artist seems like a really great way to think broadly about design concepts, not just
Right.
from within the field, from without. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I
yeah.
think we're making better human beings also because we're making people think broadly about what art um, is and can be. And you know, that's a good thing in some ways. That's a good thing.
So I want to shift gears a little bit. So we were chatting before, and I was doing a little bit of research on my end too. The Greensboro Dance Film Festival started in 2015. What made you decide, we definitely need this here in Greensboro, because this is something that everybody needs to know about? Like, what's the genesis of that?
Well, I think I was, first of all, I kind of randomly I went, at the end of we work for the state, and at the end of the year, I feel like it was 2008. I had just come back from a Fulbright in West Africa, and I was kind of working on editing all of this material that I had collected. And UNCG sent out this email. And it was like, oh, we have all this money, but you have to use it like one time, support for faculty to do something, whatever. And I had heard about this uh, film festival slash residency in Canada that I had always wanted to participate in, called Dance on Camera in Victoria, British Columbia, but like couldn't really pull it together. And they offered I wrote this quick proposal and they gave me some support. And I went to this residency in Canada, and literally it changed my life. It just happened to be run by this woman, Ellen Bromberg, who's pretty much a leader in the field. She used to teach at University of Utah, where there's a screen dance program, but she's also written books. I mean, she's just incredible. And I just happened to be in the room with her for 3 weeks. And there's several models. I don't know if this is true in narrative filmmaking, but in screen dance, there's several models of kind of festivaling. You can go to a festival, which is a screening apparatus. You go, they curate, you see. That's more or less what Greensboro Dance Film Festival is. There's also a model where you do sort of an artist residency. So artists come in, they make work, and then those works are screened as part of the festival. So you might go in for 2 weeks and work with, leaders in the field, and then, you shoot, and then your films are screened. That's another kind of model. This was that one. And I had never really I didn't even know really what screen dance was. I hadn't seen it as a kind of creative outcome. It had been more, film for me was much more sort of dance documentary based. It wasn't, a creative outcome in and of itself, the way sort of live choreography or composition was. And so I went and did this workshop and studied with this woman and just sort of fell in love. And then this was maybe 2008, spent the next, I don't know, 10 years doing deep dives into all things screen dance. And I spent a lot of time in Europe and on the West Coast, sort of working with filmmakers and choreographers that were sort of part of this scene. And that's really the genesis of it. And I started to make more film, and my films were screening, and I was meeting more people. And the more I became a part of this other community of creatives, I came back to, I was also teaching here. Now I'm teaching that technology course. And I thought, wow, what a great outcome for our students to be able to start to see what's happening in this field around the world. And that's how we started the festival. We sort of started it in the department, you know, put out these calls. I was knowing a lot of people, I was meeting people, so they would send me their films. And that's how the first iteration of the festival happened with my colleague, Dwayne Cyrus. We started it together.
Now, did it start on campus, or did you have to go to like a theater in Greensboro to screen it?
It started on campus. It literally came out of the dance program. And so it started as really screening. It was this idea of just sort of, exposing folks to this work that was happening, that had been happening, for forever, but sort of what was happening more currently. And also giving dancers the opportunity to understand and see this as a new kind of outcome. Like, what is it being like? What does mediated bodies look? What do they look like? What do they mean? And so it was on campus. And then about 4 or 5 years in, we started thinking more about the community and how do we take it off campus and engage with community stakeholders. And so that's when it moved to where it is now, largely downtown, in galleries. And so I'm actually less interested in recreating purely narrative screening models, right? Go into a theater, turn the lights off and screen, but sort of like, what does it look like to have films screening on a wall in a gallery or in a workspace? And so that's what we do now. And usually we do a kind of progressive party vibe where you might have a rollout. You screen some films here, then you go to another space that has another program that's been curated more specifically for it. And then you go to another space. Last year we screened outside. During COVID, we went back to like drive-ins and screened outside up against walls. And so the idea now is to sort of figure out ways to share all of this work with our community, which is broader than just the dance community, because the dance students help produce it. So it's both the school of dance, but it's also, our community, our Greensboro community as well.
So what has I did want to ask. So what's the response been like from from Greensboro, as a whole?
It's been fantastic. I mean, it's actually, in some ways, I'm always saying that it's too good, because we describe ourselves as this boutique festival. I mean, since its inception, and I'm in this weird spot right now where I have a couple films that are out there that have been screening around the world. And so a lot of people know me both as a director of this festival, but as a filmmaker as well. And so we get films from like all over the world. And I guess we're at the point we're trying to figure out how to grow, because I like the intimacy of the festival at the moment, but it's actually, its footprint has gotten large enough that we have to start maybe taking some time to reevaluate who we are and how we can grow to accommodate both, our community, but the number of films that we get every year. We get maybe 300 films from
Oh
around the
wow.
world, and we can't screen more than, what did we do, 24, 30 this year? Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's a, I mean, which is great, but it's also like, what would it look like if we have a touring festival now where I'm going to School of the Arts and I'm going to London and I'm taking the films to Italy this summer. That's great, but yeah, we're just trying to figure out how to grow.
Yeah, yeah, and I spoke with Dara Sanders. She's one of the organizers for the Alexandria Film Festival up in Northern Virginia.
Hmm.
We chatted a few days ago, and and the biggest question I have is, is just the logistics of running such an operation, because because you think, oh, this is a festival, we'll probably get like a few hundred entries, but then you kind of get, more than what you expect, and then you're kind of scrambling to figure out, well, how do we accommodate the, the filmmakers to where they feel like they're special, but at the same time we kind of make sure that everybody, has time. We're not, we're not, for instance, we're not giving 30 minutes to one, filmmaker, and like 10 to another, just because we're running over on time. How do you how do you work with that?
Well, first of all, we're a shorts festival, so nothing, I mean, and every year they've been getting shorter. So we don't screen full-length features, we don't screen full-on dance documentaries. We've had to kind of narrow our focus. We try not to have programs longer. This is how we kind of have to reverse design it, like you do everything. We
Yeah.
can't have a program longer than 50 minutes. We try not to, because that's a long time. So what we end up doing is just that informs the kind of films that you can take. Part of the sub theme of the festival is also making sure that we try to highlight artists of color both in front of and behind the camera. So we make sure that we're creating, spaces for everyone. And that is the work. And that's what's really hard in terms of infrastructure, because you've got all of these kind of, parameters that you're trying to meet and maintain, while at the same time you want to be able to share as much of the work as you can. One of the things that we did do is we did a second day. So now we've got two full screenings. We could do more. Last year we did three. This year
Okay.
so far we've done two. We did two back-to-back days. We did an opening night and party, and I do a lot of festivals. I curate for everybody else, so I kind of have a sense of how other festivals work. Dance festivals, as a matter of fact, really
Mm.
specifically. But and that's what I mean by growing, because how do you how do you maintain this? So we had 2 days this year plus a touring festival. Touring festival is a program that I take around with me when people invite me to come and share the work that we do at the festival, which is wonderful. But it's a lot. It's a lot. So that's the only way that we can do it. We don't take films over 12 minutes generally. Mm-mm.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So so can you go into detail about the touring festival, because I think what you're doing is amazing, and the fact that that you're situated in Greensboro. I mean, you've got, not only do you have UNC Greensboro, but you've got A&T and other schools, and then you've got over in Winston, you've got Wake Forest, and you got School of the
School of
Arts,
the Arts.
and yep. So can you talk
Going
about, like, yeah? So can you talk about the touring festival, and how you're how you are, or how you're planning to integrate or work with other schools in the area?
Oh my God, such a great question. I wish I could do more. Let's just also, like, side note, I have a full-time job at UNCG where I
Yeah.
teach in a variety of subject areas. So I'm doing all of this while, like, holding down a day job. And so it's a lot. We've been really trying to build up our relationships, not only with universities, but with high schools, because as we've seen, as a function of COVID, everyone is interested in screen dance right now. Like, everyone wants to pick up a phone or camera and make a dance, which is great. And a lot of people have been inviting us in. I do a lot of workshops in terms of, what is screen dance? How do you make a dance film? And what makes it different from a documentary or, archival footage? Like, how do you take a creative idea and use, cinema to realize it? Because it's not cinema and it's not just dance. It is the it's a hybrid form that exists in and of itself. And
Right.
I'm really excited about sharing that with young people, but it's really not always easy. So we have a direct relationship with UNCSA right now, both dance and media. We are going over there. This is the second year that we've kind of gone and taken the touring program over there, share it with students. And we've done work with Elon in the past. Elon has a dance film course, and they have like Elon in LA, which they used to go every summer and go out there and make dance films. So there's work being done in the area, but it's really hard. It's really difficult to connect and share the work. I find that I get much more traction as a curator and as a filmmaker, actually, sort of, um, internationally. So I work with a company in London, LDR Creative, who produced the film Uprooted. I'm doing a touring there. I'm going to Corciano in Italy, where I have connections there. We're taking our touring program there. So yeah, it seems like there's much more traction outside of the area. I wish there was more within the community. Generally, a lot of those folks come to the festival when it's screening downtown, though. So there's that.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So so you're getting a lot of interest, outside of Greensboro, but
Hmm.
or I should say the triad.
To try
If
it.
local
Exactly.
speak.
Exactly.
Now, now, speaking of that, I do want to ask you a much more serious question. Now, recently, the chancellor of UNC Greensboro had made several announcements about cutting programs, and among the programs we did notice that there were a few arts programs that got the axed, and personally, I think. I think this is just phase one. I think there's more to come. Can you can you talk about like how you feel about the whole axing program in general and what your thoughts are?
I probably shouldn't publicly, but it actually it's okay because most of the senators from faculty have been. I mean, this stuff has been in the news as well. So
Right.
they're calling it on campus. They're calling it program reviews, and these are all internal, by the way. They're not mandated by the state, so no one. We've been doing both program reviews and these sort of budget exercises every year where we go in and propose 4, 6, and 8% budget cuts across our programs. And so it's just been a lot. Programs, it's really, in my and most faculty's estimation, it's a numbers game. They're looking at cutting programs, where the student retention is low and or numbers are low. And so I mean, otherwise why would a math program be cut? But
Right.
I think that the general consensus is that the you know that there's a desire to cut these programs who can't maintain the numbers, right? And numbers, because as much as we want to imagine, this ivory tower and an academic institution as being this space for all of this sort of, whatever higher learning, it is also a business. And it seems to me that the program review, which is not over actually, has been coming down to programs that weren't, didn't have numbers or weren't running successfully. And all of the different programs across campus were asked to do these exercises and produce all of these numbers and justifications for, where the programs were. The arts in general didn't fare as badly as we thought they would, right?
Yeah, and that really surprised me too because
Hmm.
because when I was reading up on these articles and I saw the news footage of of all these students protesting. I'm just thinking, oh God, it's just like with it's just like with the public schools, or they're going to axe the arts programs. But when you look at it, it's like wow, I mean they were not as badly affected as say like the rest of the arts and science programs.
Exactly. And it's again, and we don't even know if the things that are axed are completely gone, right? They're saying, oh, there's still conversation that can be had around this. But I think ultimately, I mean, I just think it bodes really, really, really poorly for state education in general, but UNC, the UNC system and UNCG in particular.
Mhm.
Again, you know, because of one, it doesn't have the support. Obviously it doesn't have the support of the college communities at all. And we're watching these programs get cut. And there's also really the rationale for the cuts have also been relatively like porous and weak. And so, yeah, it's an exercise that, and they call it an exercise, but it's one that doesn't have the support of faculty on campus. In fact, it has the opposite. And I just think it does not bode well for us here in North Carolina at all. But at UNCG in particular, it's been really a messy, messy, ugly 2 years because we started with the budget exercises and concerns that our colleagues across campus would lose their positions,
Right.
non-tenure track, but staff and lecturers were vulnerable to these budget cuts. And then, then we're the following year after we get through those exercises, we're doing these program reviews. So it's just been a lot. It's been a lot.
But I mean, like, if I were to play devil's advocate for a moment, I mean, if you think about it, it's sort of a response to what we've seen over the past few years. First with COVID and the lockdown,
Mm-hmm.
and overall the general fact that most college enrollments have dropped significantly. Because I mean, any report that you read, most universities and colleges are going to say, yeah, attendance has fallen by 3%, which is quite significant because that represents a huge loss of income, and then from there most administrators will probably start looking at programs and deciding which ones to cut and using the rationale. Well, it's a numbers game. If let's say if the anthropology department is pulling this number, but dance is pulling this number, well, I mean, which one would be more logical to cut because it's not bringing in as much attendance, i.e., enough money to
Mm-hmm.
justify remaining. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, speaking as someone who went to UNC Greensboro, when I arrived, when I was looking at um, colleges to go to back in 2006 and '07, I mean, when I looked at the brochure for UNC Greensboro, what struck me was the fact that you had just like this huge buffet of subjects that you could choose from. Everything from from your basic anthropology, sociology, political science, math, that kind of stuff, to consumer apparel design, dance, interior architecture, media studies. It was like you could get all of this for, at that time it was like $9,000. You can get all of this for like $9,000, as opposed to now where it's like, well, we gotta scale back, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and all the while tuition is increasing, incrementally. So that's what I find a bit disheartening about the situations, because you know we remember how UNCG was back in the day, how it had a lot of potential, a lot of promise, and to see where it is now, to where it feels like it's sort of a shadow of itself. You kind of wonder, well, was it all worth it, really?
Well, and also even with the numbers, is it really not currently sustainable? I mean, there are programs that were cut because there's only a few students enrolled in particular courses while the program itself is actually doing rather well. And we also know from the numbers that now in post-COVID, students that had taken time off are beginning to come back. And so I agree. Like, what is it? What is the objective of the exercise? What's the purpose of the exercise? What will UNCG become? I think that there's a lack of confidence across the board, particularly with faculty, as we are subjected to these program reviews, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and this is just me getting on my soapbox. So I mean, so just bear with me. I mean, what I also find kind of strange, and I've told this to family and friends over the past few months, following that news. I mean, UNC Greensboro as a campus has expanded quite significantly. I mean, there are parts of Greensboro where, like, a few years ago, like, you couldn't walk down the street without feeling a bit apprehensive, and now they've been absorbed as part,
by UNCG. Yep.
yeah, as part of the campus. Like Lee Street, for instance, Lee Street
Mhm.
is now because is pretty much a part of campus as you know as any other as much as Tate Street, for instance.
Mhm.
But but at the same time, I'm wondering. Well, I mean, well, yeah, it represents an expansion of of the campus, which means there's an expansion of the student body. But but does this mean it comes at the cost of us losing a lot of these programs? I kind of feel like, in my mind at least, and if you don't want to respond to it, that's fine. I feel like it's kind of a poor trade-off because we get a
Mhm.
bigger campus, but we kind of get like a smaller, I guess, buffet of academic academic disciplines as a result.
Well, you think? I mean, one of the big problems this year has been this conversation about this multi-million-dollar gaming center, and we
That's
can't.
right.
You
That's
know what I
right.
mean?
And I
And
don't
yet we're going to
understand like
cut math
why.
programs. Exactly. And I think that there is probably a connection between this and donors and who's giving what money. Sports continue to grow and thrive. Our sports programs. So it is, I think it's also a question of what of our priorities. And I don't know that those priorities necessarily um, reflect campus climate at all. I think that some of this is happening at the executive level, and it does not reflect the priorities of campuses at all.
Yeah, and
That is also my feeling.
what's ironic is the fact the priorities that we're placing on these programs, and we don't even have a football team. Like, I mean, I mean, and I've said this for a while now. It's like UNC Greensboro is pretty much acting like a Big Ten school without the Big Ten football team.
Without the Big Ten football team. Yeah,
Yeah, so it's
there's,
it's
there's
it,
that.
yeah, but even then, they're not cutting anything. I mean, so it's like,
Yeah.
what's the point of acting like these guys if you got to like trim a few things? But Robin, I just want to go ahead and wrap things up. It was really, really great talking to you about the dance festival, as well as talking about UNC Greensboro. If people are interested in learning about you or your work or the festival, where can they go?
Sure, they can go to. I have to get in front of my computer because I can never remember our website. We did a whole new branding rollout this year. We've got a new website. It's Greensboro Dance Film Festival.org. And everything you pretty much need to know about us is there. You can sign up for our newsletter. We're blogging now, and we're also on all the socials at GSO Dance Films on Insta, Greensboro Dance Film Festival on Facebook.
No, I did. No, I did see recently. You've got you had an event probably like a few weeks ago, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, over at Odin Brewery. I
Yeah,
see.
that was our kickoff party. It was this was the second event that I was talking about that we did this year. First time we collaborated with Odin Brewery, and we had a opening night party where we were just screening films and hanging out. And it was fantastic. So much fun. I'm doing that again. That was fun. Yeah, that was really fun.
I mean, just speaking as someone who who did a lot of bar hopping, in Greensboro. Have you guys ever held an event at Natty Greens?
No, Natty supported us back in the day. They used to provide us, they used to like be one of our vendors and provided us support. But Odin is the new hot thing, babe. Odin's dope. It's really, really dope. It's only been around for a couple years, but it's the new spot. Now there's always Old Town. Old Town will always be Old Town, and it is what it is. But Odin has like all of these interesting spaces, this big outdoor space. They bring in food trucks. They have an upstairs space. And so we were able to like set up project screens and projectors around the interior and just screen films while people were hanging out drinking beers. Like the way the space is set up is really quite nice. It's family friendly. In the summertime, people bring their kids. There's a little like area for kids to play. It's kind of dope. I will say that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta check out Odin Brewery because
Oh, you
like I
have
said,
to.
because I've been so used to Natty Greens. I'm like, no, there is no other place like Natty Greens
And there's
apart
also
from
like
Old Town.
4 other breweries now in Greensboro. Oh, you have to come. Oh my God, there's South End next to Transform where we were. There's a whiskey, I don't know, distillery next to that. Like there's like three
Really?
breweries on
Oh,
South Elm right now.
a
There's
whiskey
three.
distiller. Okay,
There's
gotcha.
there's a place where there's a place on a new place. I forget the name of it. I'm reaching out to them because I want to hold an event there. Another brewery on Gate City, that just opened. That's supposed to be really nice and popular right now as well. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. It's craft brewery city, babe.
Wow, and here I thought Natty Greens was like at the cutting edge. I mean, but
Oh
but, mi-
no. I
but
mean,
mind you,
Natty's Greens is still fabulous, but it's definitely not cutting edge. It's got so
yeah,
much competition right now. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
Natty Greens is now like it's kind of like the old man of the microbrewery scene.
kind of at this point in time, kind of, but it's kind of a staple. It'll
Yeah,
not go anywhere. It still is like a hot spot downtown, but there's a brewery, I forget the name of it, right across the street from it. Like, oh my
I know
god.
what you're talking about because
Yeah.
I saw it the other day, just when I was browsing around.
Yeah.
So as this is a movie podcast, I do want to end with a question that I ask all my guests.
Huh?
What's your favorite movie or TV show that you've seen recently that you just want to spread the word about?
Oh my God, recently. Well, it's just so weird because I don't even know if this is my favorite, but it's Saturday morning. I woke up this morning and it was gray out. I have this thing because I am still a wannabe film critic at heart. I watch all of the Oscar nominated films. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
a thing that I do. And I have my friends in the industry and we all watch them and we make our predictions or whatever. And I just saw Rustin this morning, which is about Bayard Rustin and the how he organized the March on Washington. And it's kind of like it's not sad, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful film. I don't know that that is my favorite though. But I just watched it this morning. I thought, oh my God, this film is incredible. It was really quite good. And he's nominated for Oscar for Best Actor, and everybody's in it. It's really quite good. I mean, in terms of Black filmmaking, it's really quite good. All of Us Strangers by Andrew Haig is a director that I love. I kind of love that film. It's really strange and dark. Um, I don't know. I don't really watch series television much, except to watch like Walking Dead reruns. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't know,
Yeah, yeah,
like
exactly.
nothing new.
Your
But
guilty pleasures. Yeah.
or I watch like British procedurals or something random. Like I don't watch regular television. But I do watch a lot of films. I kind of didn't dig Saltburn, but I watched it. Yeah.
What's funny, I'll tell you what's funny was that a few weeks ago, for our season 2 premiere, we did a review of Poor Things, and initially I was like, you know what, we should review Saltburn, but my co-host was like, yeah, it's too weird of a movie, and I'm like, all right, well, what about Poor Things? And he was like, yeah, and and the day before we were set to review, he was like, this is like the weirdest movie I've ever seen. I'm like, yeah, I know, like maybe we should have reviewed Saltburn. And it's like, yeah, maybe we should have.
And a lot of people, and Poor Things is getting a lot of traction. I'm not a big Emma Stone fan, but it's supposed to be quite good. I haven't seen it yet. I've got 4 films I have to watch before tomorrow. I did watch A Divine Joy in The Holdovers, which was actually
It was a
such
good
a
movie.
it's so good. And it's my life because I went to boarding school. So I went to boarding school in Connecticut literally in 1979. That's like
So you
my
could
time.
definitely relate to that.
I totally related to it. It was genius. I did love that. I mean, I love different things for different reasons. I loved Oppenheimer just for sound. The sound score is just phenomenal.
Mhm. Well,
Uh,
I was gonna say, I was gonna say because I was talking to a guest recently. We did recently done an episode about Shakespeare and Tudor politics,
mhm.
and I was telling them I was like, you know what? If you think about Christopher Nolan, could be seen as like a modern Gothic filmmaker because
Mm.
because the underlying themes of the visual aesthetics, a lot of it kind of aligns with the traditional understanding of what Gothic is. And if you think about Oppenheimer, could be seen as like a modern rendition of Frankenstein in a way.
Ooh. Ooh, that
Um, so so I would love to do an episode at some point where we actually sit down and have a more in-depth discussion about not only Oppenheimer, but a discussion about Nolan's films in general, because I think a lot, and maybe it's true or not, but I think a lot of his cinematic aesthetics are informed by the Gothic. I mean, it could be something as obvious as, as The Prestige, which is set in Victorian London, or the
Right.
Dark Knight films,
The dark. Hmm.
which obviously, are Gothic in themselves. But you could even take a look at something like Tenant or Interstellar
Or
or
Interstellar.
Inception.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, there's just so many things about it that would conform to the traditional understanding of what Gothic is. It's like, wow, why haven't I ever thought of this before?
That
Uh,
is an interesting. That is an interesting. That would be an interesting conversation. And again, this is the film wannabe film critic in me that never actually died. So this is the sort
I
of
mean,
thing that I.
listen, Robin, you're more than welcome to come on as a guest critic on the podcast. I am not shutting the door.
Oh no,
Uh,
not at all, not at all. But I definitely love these kind of conversations because yeah, and I think that I try to as best I can. I had my students watch Oppenheimer for sound, right? And then gave them an assignment where they had to make a sound score. They had to tell a story using sound without
ooh,
visuals. Yeah, but the one of the big references was Oppenheimer, and the sound score. And I think that's really interesting. Like I never would have thought of it, but it would make me watch all the films again with that thread in mind. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, exactly, and it's also a challenge too, because I mean, if you watch like Tim Burton, for instance, like, oh, no, really, like who would have thought Tim Burton is a Gothic filmmaker?
Right. But you could absolutely. Oh, I could definitely see that one for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to go ahead and just wrap up the conversation, but Robin, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to be on this podcast, and I definitely do plan on having you return. So please let me know what your schedule looks like, because I would love to have you return for future episodes.
I would love to, and it has been my pleasure. Thank you so much for this. It's so much fun.
Absolutely, and I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to watch this episode, and remember to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll catch you on the flip side.